Finally, my Zelda revisit has taken me to the Nintendo DS. One thing I remember at the time was that Nintendo was trying to fight their kitty image. You should have seen the ads for the Nintendo DS. Very suggestive. This game had been in development since 2004, around the time the Nintendo DS was first released. Nintendo had basically hit a dead end due to the poor sales of the GameCube, so Nintendo was hoping that with the DS they'd create new kinds of games. The decision was made to take advantage of the DS's dual screens, which is annoying for me because I had to record both screens and the lower screen can only be captured at 30 frames per second. I normally record what the dominant screen is, but in this case, it was both screens that were needed. I also apologize for the bottom screen occasionally blinking out of existence, a little problem I couldn't fix. This was around the time that Nintendo was trying to push their innovations. Also, the original DS didn't have an analog stick for reasons known only to them, so control of Link was designed around the stylus pen. You basically touch the screen and Link will go in the direction you want. It actually works perfectly fine for what it's worth. Although one problem Nintendo has had with doing their innovations for controls and such, it's made games from this era hard to port to modern consoles without being heavily reworked. I can only imagine that Skyward Sword's emphasis on motion controls is what's keeping the HD remaster from happening on Switch. Don't take my word for that. In fact, rumor has it we're getting that sooner or later, so next year, I'll hopefully be reviewing that. But what we've got here is a sequel to the Wind Waker. IG Inuma wanted to give the cel-shaded style a second chance, and felt the DS was the perfect system to capture that type of graphics. It was definitely possible, but unfortunately one thing you must say about the 3D stuff on the DS is that it hasn't aged well visually. Hence why most developers stuck with 2D sprites. The Wind Waker ended with Zelda and Tetra setting out to find New Hyrule, so there was basically plenty of room for a sequel. Unfortunately, this game doesn't really go into how they found what they would come to call New Hyrule in the next game. I guess something like that could happen in a Gaiden Zelda game. Make it happen, Nintendo. I want to see that. You are doing Age of Calamity, after all. After an opening that recaps the Wind Waker's basic plot, Ganondorf's not seen in this game outside of this opening. But his evil influence spread across the sea, which takes on a whole new meaning after you play Skyward Sword. Oh yeah, that is coming up soon, isn't it? Nico was telling the story. I know I pointed this out already that Tetra's pirates are named Nico, Zuko, and Mako, all of which predate their more famous counterparts by a few years. Tetra doesn't like to go by Zelda. I always wondered how the transformation from Tetra to Zelda worked exactly. Like, is Zelda inside Tetra, or does Tetra just turn into Zelda? Or can she only be Zelda in Hyrule? Judging by how she turns back to Tetra when she emerged in the Great Sea, that's just my guess. Anyway, Link and the crew come across the ghost ship, but Tetra is snatched away. Typical. Leaving Link to go follow it as usual. But he can't hold on to the ghost ship and plummets into the water. But he wakes up on an island with a fairy named Sela. Using Navi's voice clips, are we? Ah, the memories. Sela takes Link to her grandfather named, Oses? How do you pronounce that? This is why these games should have voice acting. What I will say about the game's controls is that while I was at first apprehensive about using the stylus to control Link, over time I got used to it and became second nature. The old man tells Link that he must seek out help to find the ghost ship. This is where the game makes use of its dual screen. The upper screen is used for a map while the lower screen is used for controlling Link. Typically something will come down the mark on the map and Link will now jot it down with the stylus pen. So Link gets the sword this time. Swinging the sword is easy enough with the stylus pen. As ever, when it comes to doing action, Link needs to do it with the sword is done via stylus. I really wish I could just press a button for it though. Eventually, through some mishaps, Link will meet Linebeck. How shall I sum up his character? He's basically the game's attempt at a Midna-like character, and that Linebeck gets the lion's share as a character development. Linebeck is reluctant to put himself into danger, but is willing to help Link for the promise of treasure. Oh yeah, that reminds me, this is the first time Link visits the Temple of the Ocean King. The first dungeon, you'd think, right? Well, this is Phantom Hourglass's main gimmick. Link will continuously visit this dungeon throughout the game and get a little bit further each time. Every time Link steps out of the safe zone, his health will start to drain. which just makes things even more annoying. Gotta say, that is a very somber game over screen. So Link gets Linebeck out of the dungeon, and the two agree to work together. So Link learns that to find the ghost ship's position, he must acquire the spirits of what else? Courage, wisdom, and power. So let's cover the next part of Spirit Tracks, sailing. All you have to do is trace a path for their ship to go, and the ship will follow that path. It's all pretty second nature once you get the hang of it. So Link and Linebeck will arrive on Ember Island, where after some more busy work, Link will enter the first temple of the game, the Fire Temple. The Temple of Fire is so appropriately named because it's surrounded by flames everywhere. The Temple of Fire isn't a particularly challenging dungeon, as it's just designed to get you used to the mechanics of the game. Rooms that lock when you have to destroy all the enemies. The item you get is the boomerang. You simply draw a line to where you want the boomerang to go. Somebody came up with that idea, and Enuma suggested making the whole game based around that. Typical. You have to carry the big key yourself, which is a little different than how it usually is. So Link confronts the boss, Blaz, Master of Fire. He splits into smaller fire versions of himself, so Link has to use the boomerang to combine them all back into one. It's pretty standard stuff, really. He doesn't really put up much of a fight. Once he's done, you get the typical heart container and rescue the Spirit of Power, Leaf. So Link is one step closer to finding the Ocean King. Speaking of which, back to the Ocean King's temple. Yeah, now it's slightly mitigated because Link now has an hourglass that will protect him from harm until the timer runs out, then it's fair game. But Link must now avoid phantoms. If they hit you, well, you'll lose 10 seconds on your timer. Link can temporarily stun them, but you can't destroy them. That doesn't come until later. But still, going back to the Ocean King's temple, getting a little further each time because I have a new tool is not exactly my idea of fun. It was a good idea in concept, the execution just wasn't too good. Carrying these force gems is where they have to go. It's also really annoying and repetitive. What I really wish I could do is just warp to where I wanted to go, but of course then you'd miss out on some goodies that you can't get just yet. It's a catch-22. Well, with that, you access the Northwestern Sea chart. I decided to do some exploring of the sea. The map is obviously much smaller than Wind Waker's sea, but it's by no means less explorative. There's lots of hidden islands for you to find. Heart pieces, gems that will power up your sword, or sea charts which I can't use yet because I didn't have the salvage item. More on that in a bit. And then, of course, I find chasing the ghost ship through the fog to be rather annoying because it's yet another example where you have to trace the path onto the map for you to follow. This happens way too much in this game, but I did get the ability to fish, which works a little differently in this game. You have to hook them with the fishing rod and then reel them in. It took a bit of practice to get the hang of it, though I will say finding the fish you want gets really annoying after a while. So let's do the next dungeon, the Temple of Wind. Well, since we're on DS, it makes use of the microphone. This reminds me of a part in Spirit Tracks that I really hate because you have to use the microphone, and we'll get to it. The temple lives up to its name. It's got wind tunnels. Link can use them to get across gaps or go up. The item you get in this dungeon is bombs. How nice. Keep marking down these treasure chests that appear on the touchscreen. Gotta make use of those dual screens, eh, Nintendo? Now for the boss battle, Cyclock, Stirrer of Winds. This is the first boss to actually use both DS screens. The bottom you control Link, the top one you see the boss's movements. Your job is to throw the bomb into his tunnel and watch him get hurt. It's a pretty good idea. So with that, Link acquires the Spirit of Wisdom, Neri. So now 2 spirits are down, with 1 to go. And that can only mean back to the Temple of the Ocean King. Ugh. Can I just say, you remember how I hated the heart piece to get 300 hits in Wind Waker? Well, apparently they thought they had something going with that, so they did the same thing again in this game, and it's by using the stylus pen, so great, just great. Now back to the Temple of the Ocean King. Just get a little further again, unlock a new portion of the sea chart, rinse and repeat. You also get access to the salvage arm. You remember how the grappling hook served as salvage in the Wind Waker? If it ain't broke, don't fix it, but this requires the use of the touchscreen. And if you damage too much, you gotta get it fixed, which costs money, so don't do that. The ocean does have major boss battles for you to fight, which is good variety. They're not all that different from Wind Waker's bosses, you gotta shake things up. So we're off to the Temple of Courage. At this point it's pretty standard. You get the bow in this dungeon, so that means you're gonna have to use it. I really don't have much to say about this dungeon. It's pretty standard by now. The boss takes up both screens on the DS. Yeah, this kind of thing is why I'm worried about the future of these games now that the 3DS is done. The top screen shows the boss's viewpoint, the bottom is Link. I will say it's an impressive use of the DS's dual screens. But like I said, I suspect this is what keeps this game on the Wii U Virtual Console and the DS consoles. Anyway, they find the Spirit of Courage. I swear there's always something of that regard in these games. As it turns out, Celia is actually the Spirit of Courage, so yeah. So with that, Link and Linebeck set sail for the ghost ship. Sometimes when you go out to sea, you'll get ambushed by Linebeck's ex-girlfriend. Yeah, breakups can be messy, not that beating her is too hard, and you do get pretty good treasures as a result. Getting to the ghost ship requires following a specific line in the fog, which is pretty typical for a game like this. The ghost ship reminds me of the Thieves' Hideout in A Link to the Past, since your goal is to reunite these sisters who are so obviously evil. I mean, how does one fall for that? Yeah, they're evil, and they're the boss battle of the ship. Deflect their attacks back at them, you know, the usual Zelda formula, but this time with 2 screens. I guess Zelda really likes to overdo that trope. So, after you beat them, Link finds Tetra, who's been turned to stone. Second time in 2 years that this has happened. I guess this is a thing now. I mean, Skyward Sword would reveal that Zelda is essentially a goddess reincarnated in human form, so this actually makes sense why people want to capture her all the time. She pretty much has a goddess's power living in her. So the old man reveals his backstory. He is the Ocean King, and his power was drained by Bellum, the main villain of our story. I wonder if he's an incarnation of Demise's evil too. They said Ganondorf's evil influence spread across the sea, so it's a possibility. So after that, it's back to the Ocean King Temple. Again. Only thing I'll say about this visit is that drawing with a DS style pen is much more annoying than it should be. Seriously, I was supposed to draw the Triforce, but it took me a few tries to get it right. Then I had to look up a guide that showed, hey, idiot, this is how you do it. Well, another quadrant unlocked. And look, I found an island that's shaped like a Nintendo DS. Oh, isn't that cute, Nintendo? You sure are funny! But let's go now to the Goron Temple to start the second half of the game. Once you draw near Goron Island, a giant monster comes out. How do people set sail in this universe? You'd think people would be too scared to do so. The Goron Temple has Armos statues. Good to see you guys again. The main gimmick of the dungeon is making use of the bomb juice. Draw a line with the touchscreen. Really don't have much to say about this. You do get help from a Goron. I guess it's similar to the 2 temples from Wind Waker where you had to restore the Master Sword's power. I just know I'm going back to the Temple of the Ocean King whether I want to or not. The boss is Dongo Rongo. That's quite the name. Not quite as ridiculous as Bongo Bongo, but up there. Gongoron has to fight him head on while Link is trapped on the other side of the lava. Once you knock Dongo Rongo down, Link has to trace a bomb chew into its mouth. Then Link has to fight him head on. Do that and you get the Force Medal. Our little plot MacGuffin to make a better sword so that we can seal Bellum away. I mean, the Master Sword is trapped in Ganondorf's forehead at the bottom of the sea, so that's off limits. Actually, knowing the ending of Skyward Sword puts that bit into a new context, but we'll get to it. Wait, I'm not going back to the Temple of the Ocean King? I just go to the next part of the story? Huzzah! Anyway, this island reminds me of the water tribe from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Probably the same thing. I do appreciate the world building in Zelda, makes it feel more alive. So now it's time to enter the Temple of Ice. Well, the Temple of Ice has icy pathways, which is typical. You do get the grappling hook in this dungeon, which actually serves a unique purpose. Link can use it to create tight ropes to walk over, which I find to be a very cool feature. So yeah, I like this item in this game. The boss of the dungeon is Gleeok, a dragon with 2 heads. I do like how it makes use of the grappling hook in creative ways, so just repeat the process, dodge the tidal waves, and then get the Force Medal. So after that, it's back to the Temple of the Ocean King. I don't know what else to say. If you haven't gotten sick of going back to this same stupid temple and getting a little bit further each time, well, you have more patience than me, I commend you. Anyway, let's go to the Isle of the Dead and enter Mutah's temple. We're almost done, thank the video game gods. There's some history to this island. You have to soothe the restless spirits of the dead, which Link has technically done before. I swear, it's like been there, done that with every franchise I do, isn't it? Mutah's temple isn't really anything special. You've played the other dungeons, so you know what to expect by now. You get the hammer in this dungeon, and I love the hammer as always. It's one of my favorite items to use in Zelda. Link Smash! But let's get the boss battle done. It's Eox, a huge stone giant that takes up the entire screen of the DS. I guess they finally managed to use that giant Colossus battle they wanted to do in Ocarina of Time. You launch yourself into the air and hit the red spots with the hammer. It's pretty damn good. So with him done, you finally have all the pure metal pieces to make the sword you need. So Link takes the pieces and the sword is going to be worked on, but you have to wait a little while for it to be ready. Once you go back, the sword is ready. One little bit I laughed at is that the usual trend of Link pulling out whatever he carries only for it to be snatched away from him. The Ocean King fuses the Hourglass and Phantom Sword together. Always so satisfying. Before I went to the final dungeon, let me say I found this arrow minigame really annoying to get a heart piece, mostly because you have to be so damn precise with the touchscreen. Normal controls are not an option at all, and finding all the fish you need is way too much of a hassle. Way more than it should be. Damn it. So, with all that done, finally back to the Temple of the Ocean King again. You get a scene with Linebeck. His character arc progresses a little bit. He has come a long way from the coward who was only out to get treasure to actually caring about this little kid. There's one key difference with this trip to the Ocean King dungeon. Now that you have the Phantom Sword, Link can now kill the Guardians with it. This almost makes going through the entire dungeon again worth it, just to give those guys some major payback. So now we finally confront Bellum. The first stage of the fight with Bellum takes place on multiple floors. I must say it's a unique image to have Link be running up the stairs to damage Bellum's eye. This is probably my favorite uses of the game's dual screens. Once you wear Bellum down, Ciela will regain some of her memories. Then back down for more fighting. Ciela will freeze time, allowing Link to get him close and stab Bellum in the eye. So Link seemingly destroys Bellum but falls down a pit. Ain't that always the way? Link ends up on Linebeck's ship. Link is finally able to restore Tetra to normal. Yeah, that's nice. This is like the second time I've had to turn you back from stone. It seems Tetra was fully conscious while being turned to stone. I do like that implication because it lets Tetra be up to speed about everything that was going on. Of course, the battle wasn't over. Tetra doesn't really get to do much in this game. It's kind of a shame. What follows next is the battle at sea. I guess it's only fitting. I was surprised Wind Waker didn't make use of the sailing mechanic for its final battle. The ship grosses me out. Eyes being on things where it doesn't belong, it makes my nose itch. But there's really not much to this boss battle. It's what you've come to expect. So you finally get on the ship for the final battle. So after all that, it's finally time for the Final Showdown. This scene serves the purpose of giving Linebeck his completion to his character arc when he takes up Link's sword and saves him from Bellum. This just ends up getting him possessed because he's not the hero, Link is. The final battle, the top screen allows you to see when Bellum's eye is exposed, while the bottom screen is used for controlling Link. When the eye is open, you freeze time, get behind him, and whack away. Really nothing special. As far as final bosses go, this is pretty middling. It doesn't have the atmosphere of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess final bosses, but that's okay. Just keep doing it enough times and Bellum will be defeated. Linebeck is restored to normal because this is a kid's game. So yeah, I will admit, I don't find Linebeck to be the most compelling character so far in Zelda, but he has his moments. His arc makes sense. Starts off a coward and becomes more brave as the adventure goes on, and he and Ciela drop their animosity. But of course Link and Tetra can't stay, they must return to their own world. I do like the goodbye as it feels appropriately somber. The Ocean King has been restored and now our adventure ends. How would I sum up the Phantom Hourglass? It's an ambitious attempt, I will admit. It does try to make use of the hardware it's on, but maybe a little too much. I don't find the touchscreen controls particularly bothersome. They work well enough for what they are, but honestly the game's repeated attempts to throw you through the same dungeon just really brings it down for me. So this is pretty low on my Zelda game tier list. Wait till I review Breath of the Wild 2. I will do a tier list for all Zelda games. If Zelda does anything well, it's bittersweet endings, as Link and Tetra return to their world. And we are left wondering if the adventure was really real or not. But it turns out it was. Thank God they didn't pull a Link's Awakening again. Join me next time for Zelda when we cover Spirit Tracks, which is basically this game, but with a train! Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please hit that bell, like, and subscribe button. If you want updates, follow me on Twitter or join my Discord, which are provided in the description below. See you next time.